Her own family sold her off, calling her barren, but what she believed was a curse turned out to be the doorway to a new life. In just 3 days, the Vampire King not only made her a mother, but gave her an immortal love her family could never have imagined. Her mother's hand trembled as she pressed the old silver bracelet into her palm, whispering that this was for her own good, but the girl could hear the lies shaking in every word. Her life was being traded away under the cold glow of the mansion lights, and yet somewhere beneath her fear, a small, stubborn part of her heart refused to die. The car door shut behind her with a soft, final click, and Alina felt the night swallow her whole. The air around the hilltop mansion was sharp and clean, carrying the scent of wet stone and pine trees after rain. Soft golden light spilled from tall glass windows, but to her it felt like the glow of a distant world she did not belong to. Her mother stood beside her, one comforting hand on her shoulder, the other smoothing the front of Alina's simple dress as if appearances still mattered. "Stand straight," her mother whispered, voice tight. "Don't cry, he doesn't like weakness." Alina swallowed hard. "You're selling me because I'm useless to you," she managed, her voice barely more than a breath. The word infertile sat like a stone in her chest, a label the doctors had given her and her family had turned into a sentence. Her mother's jaw clenched. "You're being given a chance," she replied, not meeting Alina's eyes. "A roof, safety, food, respect, things we can't give you now." She sounded like she was reading from a script someone else had written for her. "Do not ruin this." Alina looked up at the mansion again. Tall, modern, almost silent, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Somewhere inside lived the man she was being given to, the man her family only referred to in hushed, nervous tones, the king. Not a king of countries, they had said, a king of something older, something they never named out loud. The front doors opened without a sound. He stepped out as if the night itself were making way for him. Tall, dressed in a perfectly cut black suit that absorbed the shadows, his presence seemed to bend the air. His skin was too pale, like moonlight pressed into human shape, and his hair fell in a smooth, silver-blonde sheet to his shoulders. But it was his eyes that froze Alina in place, gray, almost colorless, holding a depth that made her think of oceans at midnight. There was something ancient there, an exhaustion so quiet it almost felt gentle. Her mother's hand tightened painfully on her shoulder. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice suddenly small. The Vampire King's gaze drifted over them, slow and unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world. Maybe he did. The rumors said he had lived through centuries, watched empires rise and fall like passing storms. People called him a monster, but they still came to him, still made deals in the shadows, still offered what they loved most in exchange for his protection. Tonight, what they offered was Alina. "Is this her?" he asked, his voice smooth and low, carrying an accent Alina couldn't place, as if every language he had ever spoken had left a trace on his tongue. Her mother pushed Alina forward a little too quickly. "Yes, Your Majesty, this is my daughter Alina." His eyes narrowed, studying her. Alina fought the urge to look away. She had promised herself she wouldn't. If this man was going to own her, she would at least face him with whatever dignity she had left. "You are afraid," he said softly. It wasn't an accusation. It was an observation, almost curious. Alina clenched her fists. "You bought me," she replied, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "I think fear is reasonable." A flicker passed through his expression, something quick and unreadable, like a shadow across glass. Her mother stiffened in horror, her fingers digging into Alina's arm. "Forgive her," she rushed to say. "She is stubborn, but she is obedient, Your Majesty, and as we told your steward, she cannot bear children, so—" "Enough," he cut in without raising his voice. The word was quiet, but it seemed to still the very air around them. Alina felt her mother fall silent beside her, as if someone had taken the strength from her lungs. The Vampire King took a slow step closer. Alina could hear the soft whisper of fabric, the distant hum of crickets in the hedges, the gentle splash of water from a hidden fountain. The closer he came, the more she could feel something like a quiet pressure against her skin, a presence that was not quite human. "Well, what did your family tell you about me, Alina?" he asked. She hesitated. "That you are powerful," she said. That you protect those who belong to you, that you do not age, she swallowed, and that you need someone because your bloodline must continue. It was what had made her worth selling despite being called infertile. The irony burned in her chest. She had never been enough for her own family, but apparently she was enough for a king who lived in shadows. His gaze moved over her face, searching. And what do you believe? Alina forced herself to lift her chin. I don't know you, she said quietly. I don't know if you are a savior or a monster, but I know they sold me as if I were broken, and you accepted the offer. For a brief second, the slightest, saddest smile touched his lips, then vanished before it could fully form. I accept many things, he murmured. That does not mean I believe the lies attached to them. Her mother shifted, impatient and anxious. Your Majesty, as agreed, once the contract is done, our debts. His eyes flicked to her. Your debts are cleared, he said. You may go. The words hit Alina like a physical blow. That was it. No goodbye, no last look. Her mother's fingers slipped from her arm as if burned. For a moment, she looked as though she might say something, might finally see her daughter not as a burden, but as a child she was losing. Instead, she nodded briskly, turned, and walked back toward the waiting car. Alina watched her go, her throat burning. Mama, she whispered, the word escaping before she could stop it. The woman paused for the smallest fraction of a second, shoulders tightening, but she did not turn back. A moment later, the car door closed and the headlights washed white across the driveway. As the car rolled away down the long, winding road, Alina felt something inside her crack, quiet and clean, like thin glass breaking under too much weight. When the silence finally settled again, it was just her and him. The Vampire King stood still, hands at his sides, watching her with an expression she could not decipher. Not hunger, not triumph, something heavier, something almost apologetic. You are not property here, he said at last, as if choosing each word with care. No matter what they told you, you are under my protection. Alina let out a shaky breath that was almost a laugh. Protection, she echoed. From what? They already did the worst they could. His eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. From the world, he said. From those who would use your pain for their gain, from yourself if it comes to that. Well, he offered his hand. Up close, she could see the faint blue veins beneath his pale skin, the elegant lines of his fingers, the simple silver ring on his thumb. There was no ring of a king, no crown, no visible symbol of power. Just a quiet certainty in the way he stood, as if the earth itself had accepted him a long time ago and simply never let him go. Alina stared at his hand, then at the doors behind him that led into the unknown. Inside this house was a life she did not choose. Behind her, disappearing into the night, was a family that had chosen to let her go. Her heart ached so fiercely she nearly doubled over, but she refused to let her tears fall here, not in front of this stranger who had bought what others had thrown away. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and placed her shaking hand in his. His touch was cool but not cold. She had expected ice. Instead, it felt like stepping into shade after standing too long in the burning sun, strange but relieving in ways she did not want to admit. Come, he said quietly. Let me show you the home they never intended you to have. They walked toward the open doors, the warm light spilling over them, washing the sharp edges of the night from her skin. Every step echoed softly against the polished stone, marking the rhythm of a life ending and another beginning. Just as they crossed the threshold, Alina heard him draw in a very slight breath, as if surprised by something only he could sense. He glanced down at her, his gaze suddenly sharper, more focused. For the first time, his calm composure seemed to crack, revealing something like shock. Alina, he said slowly, almost as if speaking to himself, who told you that you could never carry life? She stopped, confusion cutting through her grief. The doctors, she answered, frowning. My parents, everyone, why? The Vampire King's eyes glowed faintly, like storm clouds catching hidden lightning, as he looked at her, not at her face but through her, as if seeing something deep inside her that no one else had ever bothered to look for. His voice dropped to a whisper that still somehow filled the vast hall. Because, he murmured, they were wrong. The doors closed silently behind them, sealing the night outside, as Alina's breath caught in her throat and 1,000 questions crashed through her mind, none of which she dared to ask, not yet. And in that suspended moment, with her hand still in his and her whole future about to be rewritten, she realized that whatever this place was, nothing about her life would ever be the same again. Her footsteps sounded too loud in the endless hallway, each soft tap on the polished floor reminding her that there was no way back. The air inside the mansion felt different from the cold night outside, warmer, scented faintly with cedarwood, old books, and something sweet she couldn't quite name. Light from crystal fixtures washed the walls in a soft golden glow, turning the shadows gentle instead of threatening. Alina walked beside him, her hand still in his, replaying his last words again and again in her mind. They were wrong. Nobody had ever questioned the doctors. Nobody had ever questioned her parents. But here was a creature older than anything she could imagine, looking at her like he could see truths even her own body had hidden from her. She glanced up at him. "What did you mean," she asked quietly, "about them being wrong?" He did not answer immediately. His face was calm, almost unreadable, but his eyes, those strange, depthless eyes, held a quiet storm. At the end of the hallway, a pair of tall doors opened on their own, as if the house itself was responding to his presence. They stepped into a high-ceilinged sitting room filled with soft, warm light. Velvet armchairs in deep green stood near a stone fireplace where a gentle fire crackled. Tall bookshelves lined the walls, heavy with leather-bound volumes. The entire room felt strangely alive, like it had spent years waiting for voices that never came. He released her hand slowly, almost reluctantly, as if breaking some fragile thread between them. "Sit," he said softly, gesturing to the chair closest to the fire. "You are shaking." Only then did Alina realize how cold she felt. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her dress and sat down. The fire's warmth was comforting, but her thoughts were anything but calm. He did not sit opposite her like she expected. Instead, he moved to the window, standing with his hands clasped loosely behind his back, his silhouette framed by the dark sky and distant city lights below the hill. For a few moments, the only sounds were the soft crackle of fire and the faint ticking of an old clock somewhere in the room. "You asked what I meant," he said at last. "About you." Alina leaned forward, fingers tightening around the arms of the chair. "Yes." He turned his head slightly toward her, studying her with quiet intensity. "I see blood differently than humans do," he began. "I see the currents beneath the surface. Strength, weakness, wounds, potential. It is not magic. It is simply what I am." She swallowed. "And what did you see in mine?" He stepped closer, his movements calm and unhurried, then crouched beside her chair so that his eyes were level with hers. Even this close, she did not feel threatened. Instead, she felt something else entirely, like the world had shrunk to the space between their two breaths. "I saw a woman who has been told she is broken," he said, "so many times that she believes it. I saw scars, yes, but not emptiness, not failure." His gaze moved to her chest as if he could see her heart beating beneath her skin. "Your body is not barren, Alina. It is simply guarded, closed like a door someone convinced you must never open." A bitter laugh escaped her before she could stop it. "My parents spent every last coin trying to fix that door," she said, staring into the fire. "Treatments, tests, more tests. Then when nothing changed, they started selling the furniture, the car, my father's tools. They said I had taken everything from them and given nothing back." He listened without interrupting, his expression softening with every word. "They started looking at me like I was a mistake they couldn't return," she continued, voice tightening. "And then one day my mother came back from town with this hope in her eyes, not for me, for them. She said there was someone willing to take responsibility for me, someone powerful, important, someone who didn't care that I was defective as long as I agreed to live here, with you." Her fingers curled into her dress. "They said it was mercy, a blessing, a second chance, but they didn't ask what I wanted. They didn't even ask if I was afraid." Silence stretched between them, thick with all the unsaid things neither of them knew how to name. When he finally spoke, his voice was very quiet. I did not purchase you because I believed you could give me a child, he said. My reasons were not as cruel as your family's. Alina's head snapped toward him, surprise and suspicion tangled together. Then why, she asked. Why agree to take someone you never met? Why clear their debts? Why me? He held her gaze, and for the first time she saw something unmistakable there. Sorrow. Because 3 nights ago, he said slowly, I had a vision I have not had in over 100 years. Alina blinked. A vision. He nodded once. Sometimes when the world is very quiet and I allow myself to sleep, I see moments that have not yet happened. Not often, not clearly, but when they come, they are rarely wrong. He paused, glancing at the fire as if remembering something painful. 3 nights ago, I saw myself standing in this hall, holding the hand of a young woman who looked at me the way you did outside, afraid but unbroken, and I heard her name. Alina's heartbeat stumbled. My name, she whispered. Oh yes, he said, yours. She stared at him, half wanting to believe him, half wanting to run. So you saw me before you met me. I saw the outline of you, he corrected gently. Not your past, not your pain, only that you would arrive at my door and that if I turned you away, something very dark would follow you back into the world. His eyes dimmed, shadowed by some private regret. I have turned away too many souls in my long life. I will not add yours to that number. Her throat tightened. You felt sorry for me. No, his answer was firm, immediate. I did not pity you, I recognized you. The words hit her in a place she had been trying to hide even from herself. Recognized her. As what? As who? How can you recognize someone you don't know? She whispered. He looked at her like he was seeing an old memory and a new beginning at the same time. Because I know what it is to be misunderstood by the people who claim to love you, he said softly. To be told you are wrong, dangerous, cursed, when all you wanted was to be accepted as you are. For a breath, the centuries between them seemed to vanish, and she saw not a vampire king, but a man who had carried too many years of being feared instead of known. Oh, what is your name? She asked suddenly. Your real one, not just king. A faint curve touched his lips, the closest thing to a smile she had seen yet. My name is Aurelio, he said. It was given to me long before anyone called me a king. Aurelio, she repeated quietly, tasting the shape of it. The name fit him in a strange way, old but not distant, heavy but not cruel. He watched her for a long moment. You are safe here, Alina, he said. You will not be forced, not into my bed, not into motherhood, not into anything you do not freely choose. Whatever agreement your family signed, I will not bind you with it. Her breath hitched. You mean I can say no to all of it? His answer was simple, yes. Tears pricked her eyes without warning. Nobody had ever given her that kind of power over her own life. Not doctors, not her parents, not fate. For the first time, she felt the shape of a choice forming inside her chest, terrifying and fragile but real. But there is something you must know, Aurelio continued, his tone soft but steady. Even if you never choose to give me an heir, your presence here will change my world. It already has. That is not a burden. It is a truth. He rose to his feet and moved to a small table, pouring dark, fragrant liquid into a porcelain cup. Drink, he said, offering it to her. It is only tea. I do not take blood from those under my protection. The way he said it, so calm, so matter-of-fact, made her realize how many terrible stories she had heard about him. Stories of cold cruelty, of people disappearing into his walls and never being seen again. And yet here he was, offering her tea and choices instead of chains. She took the cup carefully, the warmth seeping into her fingers. The tea smelled of cinnamon and orange peel like winter nights and soft blankets. She took a careful sip. It tasted like safety she wasn't sure she deserved. A thought broke through her quiet, fragile calm. If what you said is true, she began slowly, if I'm not really unable, then why couldn't anyone else see it? Why did every test say the same thing? Aurelio's jaw tightened slightly. Because human eyes are often trained to look for what is wrong, not for what is dormant, he said. Your body did not respond to their methods. It closed itself to protect you from something, from whom I do not yet know, but it is not incapable, Alina. His voice lowered, a gentle promise wrapped in mystery. I saw another part of the vision, faint and flickering. I did not understand it then, I still do not fully. But I saw you again months from now, different, stronger, carrying a heartbeat inside you that was not only your own. Her fingers tightened around the cup, a heartbeat inside her. For a moment the image rose in her mind so sharply it hurt, her hands resting on a rounded belly, laughter echoing down these quiet halls, a tiny cry somewhere in the distance. Hope stabbed at her so suddenly she had to close her eyes against it. "That's impossible," she whispered. "It's cruel to say that. Don't give me another dream that can't come true." "I do not offer dreams," he replied calmly. "Only what I have seen, but what becomes of that vision depends on you, not on me." She opened her eyes slowly, drawn back to a steady gaze. "On me how?" "On whether you stay," he said. "On whether you allow yourself to heal, on whether you choose to believe you are more than what they told you." His eyes gentled. "On whether you trust me, even a little." The room seemed to breathe around them, the fire's glow deepening, shadows dancing softly along the walls. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows like a distant ocean. Aurelio straightened, his expression returning to its calm, regal stillness. "This house is yours now as much as it is mine," he said. "You will have your own room, you may explore anywhere except the lower east wing. There are things there that would unsettle you." He paused. "In time, if you wish, I will explain." Alina nodded slowly, absorbing every word. Safe, free to choose. A future that might be different from the one she had been forced to accept. It all felt too big, too bright, like stepping out of a dark basement into sudden sunlight. A door on the far side of the room opened, and an older woman stepped in. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun streaked with silver, and she wore simple black clothes, an apron tied around her waist. Her eyes, though, were warm, curious, and very, very human. "Your Majesty," she said with a respectful nod. Then she turned that gentle gaze to Alina and smiled. "You must be Alina, I'm Marta, I take care of the house, and now I suppose I will take care of you too." There was no judgment in her tone, no cold assessment, just simple acceptance, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Aurelio inclined his head. "Marta will show you to your room," he said. "You need rest, your body and your heart both." Alina rose slowly, balancing the almost finished cup of tea. She set it down on the table and hesitated, looking back at him. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know if I'll stay, if I'll give you what you wanted." Aurelio's answer came without hesitation. "Because kindness is not a bargain," he said. "It is a choice, one your family forgot how to make. I will not repeat their mistake." Her chest constricted around a feeling she could not yet name. Gratitude, fear, hope, all tangled into a single tight knot. Marta moved closer, her steps soft. "Come, child," she said gently. "There will be time for questions tomorrow." Alina nodded, but her eyes stayed on Aurelio. He stood still near the fire, its light painting his pale face in soft gold and shadow. He looked both impossibly distant and painfully human in that moment. "Good night, Alina," he said quietly. "Good night, Aurelio," she replied. Marta led her out into the hallway, their footsteps echoing softly. As they walked, Alina dared one last glance over her shoulder. Aurelio was still watching her, but this time his expression was unguarded for just a heartbeat, full of something like fragile hope and an aching loneliness he tried so hard to hide. Before the door closed, Alina caught a final glimpse of him turning toward the dark window, one hand pressed briefly over his chest as if something inside him hurt. She didn't know why, but the sight lodged deep in her heart. Because while everyone had always told her she was empty, useless, broken, here was a king of shadows who looked at her as if she might be the one thing in his endless life that could finally make him whole. And as Marta opened the door to a beautiful, softly lit bedroom that looked nothing like a prison and everything like a sanctuary, Alina realized with a sudden, trembling clarity. If she stayed, if she dared to trust him, she would not only be risking her future, she would be risking his. And somewhere deep in the quiet of the mansion, as she stepped into her new room and the door began to close behind her, a soft sound echoed from far below, down in the forbidden east wing. Like a heartbeat, or a warning, leaving Alina with one burning question pulsing in the dark. What exactly had Aurelio seen in that vision, and what price would both of them pay if it finally came true? Her first morning in the mansion began with silence so complete that it felt almost holy. No street noise, no arguing voices, no clatter of dishes from a cramped kitchen. Only the faint rustle of wind through the trees and the distant whisper of water somewhere below her window. Alina lay still beneath the soft, weighty blankets, staring up at the carved ceiling. For a moment she forgot where she was, her mind reaching instinctively for the familiar sound of her mother calling her name, her father pacing, counting bills, muttering about debts and disappointments. Nothing came. The memory hit her and her throat tightened. They were gone, they had left her here, chosen money and freedom over their own daughter. She rolled onto her side, eyes burning, and saw the room around her as if for the first time in daylight. Soft cream walls, a tall window that framed a wide view of the valley below, a small table set with a vase of fresh white lilies whose scent filled the air with something clean and gentle, a wardrobe already stocked with dresses in simple cuts and soft fabrics folded with care. None of it looked like a prison's. Yet the absence of choice the night before lingered like a bruise. She had stepped into this life because there was nowhere else to go. Now, for the first time, she had to decide whether she would stay. A soft knock came at the door. Alina, may I come in? Marta's voice floated through, warm and patient. Yes, Alina called, quickly wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Marta entered with a tray balanced on one hand. A pot of tea, warm bread, fruit, and a small dish of honey, all arranged as if she were a guest, not a burden. Marta set the tray down by the window and opened the curtains fully, flooding the room with golden morning light. How did you sleep? Marta asked, studying her with kind eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Better than I expected, Alina admitted. Worse than I needed. Marta smiled, understanding. That is how most new lives begin, she said, with too many thoughts and not enough rest. Alina hesitated, then asked the question that had lodged in her chest all night. Is he always like this, Aurelio, so kind? Marta's hands moved with practiced ease as she poured the tea. He is kinder than he believes he has the right to be, she said, and far kinder than this world has ever been to him. He's a vampire, Alina said softly, as if saying it too loudly would make something dark appear. People are afraid of him. Marta gave a little shrug. People fear what they do not understand. They call him a monster because it is easier than admitting they are the ones who come to his door with cruelty in their hearts, asking him to fix the damage they themselves have done. Alina watched the steam swirl from the teacup. My parents, did they seem cruel to you? Marta was quiet for a moment. They seemed desperate, she replied. Desperation can make people forget their own humanity. That does not excuse what they did, but it explains why Aurelio's heart ached for you before you even arrived. Alina looked up sharply. He told you that. Marta's smile turned sad. He did not need to. I have known him a very long time. A pause settled between them, heavy but not unfriendly. Marta, Alina whispered, do you believe what he said about me not being empty? Marta's gaze softened even more. Child, I believed that before he ever opened his mouth. You walked into this house carrying more life in your eyes than some women carry in their whole bodies. She reached out, brushing a gentle hand over Alina's hair. The question is not whether you can give life, it is whether you will allow yourself to receive it. The words landed like a small, quiet seed in Alina's heart, sinking deeper than her doubt. Eat, Marta said firmly, stepping back. Then walk, breathe, learn the house. He will not seek you out this morning. He will wait until you are ready. How do you know? Alina asked. Marta's lips curved. Because he asked me to tell you that. A strange, unfamiliar warmth stirred in Alina's chest, something dangerously close to being cared for. After breakfast, she dressed in one of the soft dresses from the wardrobe, a pale blue one that brought out the color in her eyes when she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. She almost didn't recognize the girl looking back. No shadows under her eyes, no lines from nights of crying into a pillow to muffle the sound. She stepped into the hallway, the polished floor cool beneath her feet. The mansion seemed different in the daylight, less like a mysterious fortress, more like a quiet, patient guardian. She passed tall paintings of places she didn't recognize, tapestries woven with stars and forests and oceans under strange moons. Everything spoke of time, of waiting, of a life lived in years that no human could ever fully grasp. Her wandering feet carried her eventually to the library. The door was half open. She pushed it gently and froze. Aurelio stood by one of the tall shelves, his back to her, reading a worn leather book he held in one hand. Sunlight filtered through the high windows and brushed his skin without burning it, as rumor had always claimed it would. Instead, the light seemed to slide over him like water, dimming slightly where it touched, as if respectful of his nature. He looked tired, not the tiredness of a sleepless night, but of too many decades spent carrying the wrong kind of stories about himself. "I can feel you thinking very loudly from all the way over there," he said quietly, not turning around. Heat rushed to her cheeks. "I didn't mean to disturb you," she replied, stepping inside. "I was just walking." "You are not a disturbance," he said, closing the book with a soft thud and finally turning to face her. His eyes flicked over her dress, her hair, the way she held herself. "You slept," he observed. "Not enough, but some." "I'm trying," she said. "I don't know what else to do." "That is all anyone can do," he said. "Try." He gestured to the long table at the center of the room, covered in maps and scattered pages. "Come," he said, "walk with me. This house has many stories. It is only fair you hear some of mine." They moved slowly through the library, his voice weaving through the air like a calm river as he told her pieces of his past, not the bloody parts people whispered about in town, but the quiet truths. He spoke of the village where he had been born centuries ago, when this land was nothing but scattered farms and wild forests, of the illness that had taken his brothers one by one while he remained, always on the edge of death but never crossing it, of the night he had been turned not by choice but by someone who could not bear to watch him suffer. "I woke up changed," he said, fingers trailing absently along the spine of a book. "Stronger, faster, hungrier. People I had grown up with looked at me as if I were a ghost wearing a familiar face." Alina walked beside him, listening with her whole body. "They called me cursed," Aurelio continued, his voice steady but threaded with old pain. "They begged me to leave, to disappear into the shadows so they could pretend I had died like the rest. They were afraid of what I could become. They never wondered what I might choose to be instead." He paused, selecting a book and handing it to her without looking. "I left," he said simply, "but I built this place where no one would be turned away because they were different, where power would not be an excuse for cruelty, where people could come when the world had used them up and thrown them aside." She looked down at the book in her hands. It was a journal, not a novel, blank pages waiting to be filled. "For me?" she asked. "For you," he confirmed. "Your story has been told at you your whole life. I thought it was time you told it yourself." Emotion rushed up her throat so fast she almost choked on it. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "You don't owe me anything." Aurelio turned toward her, his eyes suddenly very, very earnest. "I owe the world better than what I was given," he said. "If I cannot change what happened to me, I can at least change what happens to you." They stood in the center of the library, surrounded by shelves of lives already written, as Alina clutched the empty journal to her chest like a shield and a promise all at once. "Aurelio," she said, heart pounding, "this vision you had, the one where I was carrying a child, are you sure it wasn't just a dream?" He held her gaze. "Dreams fade," he replied. "Visions linger. This one has not left me since the night I saw it." An invisible thread seemed to pull them closer, not physically but emotionally, two broken histories slowly turning toward each other. "What if I want that?" she asked suddenly, the confession ripping free before she could stop it. "What if I want to prove everyone wrong, to carry something inside me that isn't pain or shame or disappointment, something alive, something wanted?" Her voice shook. "What if I want it with you?" The silence that followed was not heavy, it was full, alive with all the things neither of them knew how to say yet. Aurelio stepped closer carefully like a man crossing a river on stones he could not fully see. "Then we move at your pace," he said softly. "Not mine, not your parents, not the world's, yours." His eyes searched hers, asking without words. Alina realized then that the most terrifying, beautiful thing he had given her was not a home or safety or even the possibility of a child. He had given her consent, the right to choose. Her fingers relaxed around the journal. She drew in a long, steady breath. "Then I choose this," she said, voice trembling but clear. "I choose to stay, I choose to trust you even if I'm afraid, and I choose to believe that maybe, somehow, I'm not broken after all." Something in Aurelio's face broke open at her words. His shoulders, always held so perfectly straight, sagged with a relief so raw it made her chest ache. "Thank you," he whispered. "You do not know what that means to me." He extended his hand, not demanding, not assuming, just offering. This time, when she placed her hand in his, there was no hesitation. Their lives did not transform overnight. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The mansion slowly became less of a stranger and more of a companion. Alina learned which floors creaked, which windows caught the morning light just right, where the garden smelled most like jasmine at dusk. She read, she wrote. At first, only a few lines each day in the journal he had given her, a memory, a fear, a tiny victory, then pages, then chapters of herself she had never dared to explore. Aurelio kept his promise. He never rushed her. He never pulled more from her than she chose to give. Instead, he wove himself into her days with quiet, steady presence. They walked the halls at night, talking about constellations and old legends. He taught her to play an ancient piano in one of the upper rooms, his fingers moving gracefully over keys that had been silent for years. She filled the house with laughter that startled the dust from corners long forgotten. Sometimes she woke to find small signs of his thoughtfulness, a stack of books on subjects she had mentioned once in passing, a shawl draped over the back of her favorite chair near the fire, a sprig of wildflowers on her bedside table, still dewy from the night forest. Slowly, the image of herself as defective unraveled, thread by painful thread. One evening, as autumn began to kiss the leaves outside with gold, Alina stood before a mirror in her room, fingers pressed lightly to her lower abdomen. She had been feeling strange for days, lightheaded, nauseous in the mornings, exhausted in a way that sleep did not fully erase. Fear whispered its old, familiar stories. Something is wrong with you again. Hope whispered something else, or maybe this time something is finally right. Her heart pounded as she stepped into the hallway. Her legs felt like they were moving through water as she made her way to Aurelio's private study, a room she rarely entered without invitation. She found him there, seated at a large desk scattered with letters and old maps, the fire casting shadows across his face. He looked up the instant she appeared in the doorway, his senses picking up her presence like a change in the wind. "Alina," he said, standing so quickly his chair scraped back. "What is it? Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears already blurring her vision. "No," she whispered, I don't think so." His eyes searched her face, reading fear and something else beneath it. He stepped closer, careful as always. "Tell me," he said gently. Her voice came out broken. I think your vision was real." For a heartbeat, he didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, with infinite gentleness, he reached out and took her trembling hands in his. "May I?" he asked, his gaze dropping to her abdomen. She nodded, unable to speak. He released one of her hands and, with a reverence that made her chest ache, laid his palm flat against the soft fabric of her dress just below her ribs. His eyes fluttered shut. The room seemed to hold its breath. For a long, suspended moment, there was nothing. Then Aurelio inhaled sharply, as if someone had pressed air into his lungs after centuries of shallow breathing. His eyes opened, brighter than she had ever seen them, shimmering with a light that looked almost wet. "Alina," he whispered, voice shaking in a way that both terrified and comforted her. "There are 2 heartbeats in this room." Tears spilled over her cheeks. Her knees buckled, and he caught her instantly, drawing her carefully into his arms. She clung to him, sobbing into his chest, the sound raw and unrestrained. "I didn't want to believe it," she choked out between tears. "I was so afraid it would be another lie, another thing they would say I imagined, but I feel it. I feel different. I feel full." His hand stroked soothing circles across her back, his own shoulders shaking. "You are not broken," he murmured into her hair. "You were never broken. They simply never saw you as you are, but I do. I always have." They sank to their knees together on the carpet in front of the fire, wrapped in an embrace that felt less like comfort and more like home finally finding itself. When the first wave of emotion settled, she pulled back just enough to see his face. There were tears on his cheeks, silent, shining, unashamed. "You're crying," she whispered, stunned. "I am," he agreed softly. "You have done something I did not think possible, Alina. You have given time a meaning it had lost for me. You have turned endless years into a future I want." The confession struck her with almost physical force. "You wanted this too," she realized aloud. "Not just for some cold, royal duty, you wanted us." His answering smile was small, fragile, but full of a light that made him look almost young. "I wanted a family," he said, "not one built on fear or obligation, one built on choice, on trust, on love if the world was kind enough to grant it." She cupped his face in her hands, her thumbs brushing away the traces of his tears. "The world may not be kind," she said softly, "but you have been, and somewhere along the way my heart decided that was enough to call it love." For a long, timeless moment, they simply looked at each other, 2 souls who had been told in different ways that they were too much and not enough, realizing they had finally found someone who saw them as exactly right. When they leaned their foreheads together, it wasn't a dramatic, cinematic gesture, it was simple, human, sacred. Aurelio whispered into the small space between them, "Then let this child be born into a story different from ours, one where they never have to question if they were wanted." "We'll make that story," Alina replied, her hand unconsciously returning to her abdomen. "Together." In the months that followed, the mansion changed. Laughter became as common as silence. Marta fussed over Alina with the fierce tenderness of a grandmother, bringing her soups and blankets and gently scolding Aurelio when he hovered too closely, worried over every small discomfort. "You faced armies without flinching," Marta teased him one afternoon as he paced outside Alina's room, listening anxiously to her morning sickness. "But a little nausea and you look ready to overthrow the sun itself." "This is different," Aurelio muttered, but his lips twitched. He was there for every flutter, every change, every quiet midnight conversation when Alina lay awake, one hand on her growing belly, wondering aloud what kind of world their child would see. "You will have so many years," she told the small life inside her one night, her voice hushed. "But you will never spend them alone, not like we did." Aurelio sat beside her, his fingers entwined with hers over the soft rise of her abdomen. He would sometimes hum tunes so old even he barely remembered where they came from, and the baby seemed to answer with tiny, eager kicks. The forbidden East Wing, once a place of distant heartbeats and half-heard whispers, slowly revealed its secret. It was not a dungeon, not a chamber of horrors. It was where Aurelio had kept the remnants of his past lives sealed away. Old weapons, old portraits, old letters from people long gone who had once called him monster, savior, both. A place where pain had been stored so it wouldn't spill over into the halls where he still walked. One evening, he took Alina there at last. "This is where I kept my ghosts," he said quietly, opening the heavy doors. I think it is time they met the reason I finally stopped listening to them." They walked through the dim corridors together, her arm linked with his, her other hand resting protectively on her belly. Aurelio watched her face as she took in the relics of his long, lonely existence, waiting for disgust, fear, judgment. Instead, she turned to him with eyes full of fierce tenderness. "This is not a hall of monsters," she said. "It's a museum of your courage, every mistake you didn't run from, every grief you survived." She stepped closer, taking his hand and placing it gently over their child. "And now," she murmured, "it's the place where your past and our future finally shake hands and let each other go." For the first time in centuries, Aurelio felt the weight of history loosen around his shoulders. Not erased, never erased, but shared. The night their child was born, the entire house seemed to hold its breath and then exhale with them. There was no scream-filled chaos, only quiet strength. Focus. Aurelio stayed by Alina's side, his cool hand wrapped around hers, lending her steadiness when the pain threatened to drag her under. Marta guided, soothed, instructed with the unshakable calm of someone who had seen many births and knew that life and fear often arrived in the same breath. When the baby's first cry filled the room, it sounded like the breaking of a curse. Alina sobbed, exhausted, reaching out with shaking arms. They placed the tiny, wriggling body against her chest, warm and real and impossibly small. She could feel the frantic flutter of a brand new heart, beating against the one everyone had once called empty. "She's perfect," Alina whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Aurelio, she's perfect." Aurelio looked at them as if he were seeing the sun rise for the first time. His hand trembled as he gently touched the baby's dark, damp hair. "Our daughter," he said, the words tasting strange and wondrous on his tongue. "Our daughter." The baby quieted at the sound of his voice, as if already recognizing the steady rhythm in it that had soothed her from within. Alina shifted slightly, making space. "Hold her," she said, looking up at him with a soft, tired smile. She should know her father's arms. Fear flickered across his face. Ancient, deep, the terror of a man used to breaking things he loved, not protecting them. "I do," he began. "What if I'm—" "Not enough," she finished gently. "I have lived under that lie my entire life. I am done with it. So are you." He exhaled slowly, then slid his hands beneath the tiny bundle as if lifting spilled light. The baby fit into his arms as if they had been carved for this single purpose. She opened her eyes, then small, dark, still learning the world. For a brief second, Aurelio saw himself reflected there. Then he saw Alina. Then he saw someone entirely new. And that sometimes, the most powerful magic in the world is not fangs or visions or immortality. Sometimes it is choosing to love and to be loved forever.